Here we go. All right, well, it's 7:02. Welcome to the October 6, 2020 Planning Board meeting. In accordance with the provisions of Mass General Law which one?
That's okay, you can just say Mass General Law.
We are holding this via Zoom, and we encourage participation during our public comment periods. You will be able to raise your hand, and we will call on you and unmute you, give you a chance to unmute and speak. There is a Q&A function where you can type your questions. That's a little bit harder for us to monitor, but you can do that as well. We've got a couple things on the agenda tonight, and we'll take a roll call for the planning board members, and then we'll get started with our first item on the agenda. So, anything else before I take roll call? All right. So, Mr. Saya.
Yes.
Mr. Flint?
Here.
Ms. Orbedal?
Here.
Mr. Bosdet?
Here.
And welcome to our newest member, Ms. Miller. And you can unmute just so we can hear you say here.
Here.
Thank you. And thanks for joining us. This is Linda's first meeting with us. She, I think, has been following closely and even watching recordings of prior meetings so that she's kind of up to speed on our current applications. I think the only person that's not here right now is Ms. McNeely, and she may be joining us later. So the first item is the recommendation to the Zoning Board of Appeals for the application of Habitat for Humanity of Greater Lowell for a special permit under sections 10.32, and 11.6 of the zoning bylaw for a 2-unit planned residential development of 930 Main Street, parcel 3818. And I believe we have somebody from the applicant who can present.
We have Brenda Gould from Habitat for Humanity, John Maslowski, who's also with Habitat, and then who also has been promoted is Stan Sleppo, who's with Mass DOT in the state. And Brenda, if you want to unmute and undo your video, and John and Stan as well.
No, I was going to be on TV today. Some of these board meetings, they don't let you go on TV. So I'm Brenda Gould. I'm the Executive Director for Habitat of Greater Lowell. I'm going to do a little bit of the talking, but I wanted to let you know in the audience, I'm going to just tell you who else is here because I am not the expert. I am just the pencil pusher. The experts are on the phone. So I have John Maslowski, who's our construction manager. He has a supervisor's license. He's excellent construction. I think also in the audience, and you do not have to promote, Holly Darzan is our architect from Concord and doing all the work for us, and excellent. Jeff Brem from Meisner Brem has done all the survey, any development work as well, excellent. And then as you mentioned, Elizabeth Stan from the state, who I'm really happy has joined us in case there's some questions when I talk about what the issues are. I also believe Liz Rust from the Regional Housing Services is on as well. We should be able to answer all your questions and get through this quickly. So just a brief overview. I am so excited about this. This is going to be our 50th house. Habitat covers 15 towns in the northern Middlesex County. So we're a small Habitat, but this is our 50th and hopefully 51st house. So this is a big deal for us, and we are so excited and happy to partner with the town of Concord. I just want to make sure that you know a lot of people went into this. The Concord Housing Development Corporation, the Concord Housing Foundation, the Community Preservation Funds, Habitat put in money, and the town of Concord. So if ever there was a partnership, this is the epitome of partnership. So we are really looking forward to working with the town. This house was owned originally by Ann Dowsey, And it was her wish. She is still alive. Her father built this house at 930 Main Street. So it's kind of on the corner of Route 2, I'll say. Her father built this house many, many years back. And the reason she, I believe, sold the house to us, all of us, was because she wanted the house to be preserved. And that is our goal, to preserve as much of the house as possible, but to make it efficient, energy efficient, and economically feasible for a family that will be under 65% of the area median income. The house right now is a single family with a detached garage. If you've seen, I've given you some elevation plans, floor plans, and the site plan. But if you've seen the house, it slopes down in the back. So in the front, it's much higher than the back. When we looked at the house, our experts said, wow, we could really make this a two-family. And it would be a beautiful two-family because it looks out over, I think it's conservation and wetlands, but it's a very pretty view in the back. So our goal and our request tonight is to turn this into a two-family. The upstairs would be a 3-bedroom, 1-bath, and it would be, both of the units would be between 13 and 1,500 square feet. Actually a little bit bigger than what Habitat normally builds. But the downstairs, the lower unit, would be modified into a 2-bedroom, 1-bath with a complete glass back with a lot of light, extra windows added as well. And we are particularly excited about this because it's not often that we do a 2-bedroom unit. There's a lot of families with either parents and 1 child, or a single parent with 1 child, or a single parent with 2 children. And normally with the DHCD rules, we would not put a small family into a bigger home. So we are extremely excited about the opportunity to do a 2-family with a 2-bedroom and a 3-bedroom.
So,
we are,
Brenda,
yep.
If you would like, I can bring up the plans just for
yeah.
to go
Thank
through.
you. Yeah, that would be great. I wanted to just touch on a couple of things and we can look at the plans. We are not proposing big changes, and really any big changes to the footprint of the home. We are going to make some though, and the major one would be the garage will turn, as you can see on here, will turn into a storage unit. So let me just explain a few things on this. If you go back to that site plan, the first thing I want you to know is we did look at various options for how we wanted to situate the driveway. And the circular driveway we felt was the best way to be safer and to get the parking into the unit. And I really like the way it looks. We're working with, I think it's Delia right now on the trees, making sure we do the right thing for the trees and tree removal. But I wanted you to know we did look at various options. As I mentioned, we want to leave the house as much intact as possible. Really the main floor, and we can look at that, is going to stay pretty much the way it looks right now. The upper level will pretty much stay in that format with the kitchen to the right, the 3 bedrooms, and then a big living area in the front. We are going to upgrade some of the exterior on the building, siding, roofing, trim, so it won't look exactly alike, but it will still keep the essence of the original building. The lower unit, we are proposing a walkout level of the existing building. It will be accessed by construction of a new entry and stairway. The garage structure will be a little bit more extended toward the street, but it will have the same roof line as the existing, and it will provide space for the front door and a small covered porch. So keeping the existing roof lines means that pretty much the appearance of the home will really not change. And that was something, again, we wanted to do. It also provides for some measure of privacy for the 2 families. And then the only other, I'll say, change is the stairway down to the lower unit. It will be where the current gap is between the house and the garage. That's the stairway will be in there. The 2 homes will be separated by the fire rated construction necessary, and each home will have a second means of egress. The upper unit will be through the new deck that we're going to put on. There's a big deck there now. We're going to put a smaller deck, and the stairs down to the backyard. The lower level will have the sliding glass door in the living room area, as I mentioned, on the patio, and then the egress through the stairway down. Each of the bedrooms will have the windows necessary to make sure that there's emergency escape requirements. So the major change is the garage, putting that into a storage unit. One thing that Habitat has learned is in order to be a good neighbor, you have to have a place to put things. There's going to be bikes and there's going to be stuff, and we want to make sure that it's not out in the front yard or in the driveway. And so a storage unit we feel is very necessary. At a later date, should we look at the proposed site plan and see if a shed can be put in, that's a later date. But right now, the storage unit is kind of key. I think in general that is the main bulk of what I'm asking. And Elizabeth, I thank you for putting together this this letter. It's extremely, it covers everything and has given me an area to, really make sure that we're abiding by the rules in Concord. We haven't built in Concord since 2007, and I have to say it's a little bit different from the towns I've been dealing with. And had Jeff not made me aware of your tree bylaws, I may have gone and cut down some trees accidentally, but we want to make sure we get off to the right foot, and do this all correctly. So Elizabeth has laid out what I need to do, and we will do it. So the issue so this is what we have. The main concern right now is that small piece of the garage that's over on the state land. I have Stan here should you have any questions. We really prefer not to remove that. It's costly and would really slow us down. But other than that, everything is pretty much staying the same. It currently has a cesspool. And so we are working with one of the authorized, I guess you call it drain layers from Concord, Bill Eckelsheimer, to put in sewer lines and water lines, or I shouldn't say plural, singular. And we will do our very best not to disturb too much vegetation. And we have our rules on that. That's kind of it in a nutshell.
Thank you. Did the board have any questions for Ms. Gould, or is there another person for the applicant that would also like to add any detail?
I've got a quick question. So these will be condominiums, is that correct?
Yes, we'll put in place a condo association, yes.
Okay. And you said it will be just single water, single sewer hookup, so those won't be separated?
That is, if I read the water and sewer information, originally we were going to make it separate. Mm-hmm. My preference would be to make it separate, but based on their guidelines, they're asking for a singular. We have to figure out a way whether we can put 2 meters on one line or do some kind of deduct meter, because we don't want the families to have to worry about who's using what water.
Right, that's why I asked the question.
Yeah, we have done that before.
So Burton, what I can tell you is there's going to be 2 options, and they will easily be able to work through either option with the water and sewer division. And it comes to either they would provide their floor plans and plumbing plans to show that there is complete separation between the 2 units. Mm-hmm. To be able to somehow have 2 water hookups. If not, there would be 1 water hookup, and then they, once on the property, they can be separately metered.
Oh, okay.
So it'll just be how they work through that with water and sewer division.
Okay, great. That's my only question, Kristen.
Question about Ms. Gould mentioned the corner of the garage on state property there. Is that anything that, we need to take into account for the parts that we're evaluating?
So that's why we were happy to have Stan from the state available for this meeting. He can go through and talk about the state is willing to provide a permanent easement for that. Stan, if you want to go ahead and explain that, that would be great.
We can't hear you if you're talking. You should be unmuted. We might be having audio issues. We can come back to you, Stan, if you'd like. We can entertain any other questions from the board as well. And Mr. Maslowski, what was his role also on this, Ms. Gould?
He is the construction manager for Habitat. He's been on site and he's working with, like I said, the water and sewer, as well as the tree people, as well as structural engineers. So I don't know if he has anything to add on that, or if you have any questions on the construction part of it.
Okay. What was your timeline again for the project?
John's or mine?
What are you total anticipating for the project start and finish date?
I probably was naively thinking that we would be able to start it before the end of the year. Originally, I did have to say I was hoping we could start in September, which is long past, and be done in a year. Normally, a year. Because we build with volunteers, all with volunteers, and I know you're sick of hearing the COVID problem, but we have to be very careful with what we have on for volunteers. We only pretty much are accepting 8 people, and those are if people come out. John's done a really good job of making sure that the safety measures are on site. So we're right now building in Billerica, and due to the reduced number of volunteers we've had, we probably won't, normally we have 2 houses going at once, but we probably will hold off to start this sometime in preferably January or February, and then be done before the end of the year.
Wow, that's a challenge.
Yeah, well, we're hoping, the house is in pretty good shape.
Yeah.
So we're hoping that, we don't have to start from scratch, but as many of you know, once you start opening up walls, sometimes rehabs are harder than starting from the bottom up. So we're pretty excited about this. We have a sponsor, Salesforce, is the one who gave us the money to buy into the property, and they are sending out groups and are very excited to come up.
So Kristen, I did demote and promote Stan back in, so maybe he has audio at this time if you want to try again, Stan.
Yeah, it looks like he's still muted based on what I see, but.
Elizabeth, while we're waiting on that, I read through the report. I did not see any open items. It looks like you've heard back. You've received comment letters from all the relevant departments. I don't see any open issues, just the list of standard requirements that are contained in your memo.
Correct.
Yeah.
One thing I would ask Elizabeth, because we have a new member on the board, and for all of us who could use refreshers, if the applicant is applying for a PRD as opposed to saying that they want to construct a 2-family home, can you, in a simple way, explain kind of why they're going for this? And it's not a problem if they are, just so that we understand procedurally.
Because so 2-family is not allowed by right. It can only be done, based on the age of the house. So, but hopefully next year when the board promotes, this is in Resident C. So, so the only other option was to apply for a PRD, which allows for multifamily dwellings up to 8 units in one building. And because they are a nonprofit and both of the units are going to be offered below 80% area median income, there is a provision in the zoning bylaw that allows them to not have to meet all the other criteria for a PRD, other than the height has to be less than 35 feet and they have to get access to the lot from through their frontage from a public way. So all the other standards, such as the open space standards or front, side, and rear setbacks, all of those do not apply.
Thank you. That was helpful. Stan, you might be able to speak now. Oh, I can't hear him. I wonder if you can type in the chat. Okay, so did anybody have any questions for Elizabeth about kind of the procedure? And it looks like she's talking about the 10.2 standards, and that they meet both of the ones that they were required to meet in terms of the access from the public way and the height requirement, which is looks like it's unchanged. So unlike other PRDs, we do not need to review open space because this is because of the conditions or the reasons she just said. As Burton said, it looks pretty straightforward in terms of Elizabeth has heard back from all of the town departments and has summarized everything. What other questions do people have about the information in Elizabeth's report or the information that Ms. Gould has given us?
The only question I had was maybe to elaborate on the Concord preference that was mentioned in terms of a goal.
Yeah, I can speak to that. Stan just called me on my cell. Can I put him through maybe and you can hear him? Hang on, Stan. And then I'll go back to the local preference. Oops. Go ahead, Stan.
Sorry for the audio problem.
That's all right. We just were specifically asking about that point of land and what your take on it is.
Well, there's a procedure we must go through on a permanent easement. We need a plan created by an approved engineering consultant, and our intention is to work with Marcia and the town to try and come up with that plan if they are the designated developer on the adjacent lot. But whoever is the adjacent proposed developer for that lot, we intend to try and extend the rear lot line to accommodate and bring it down to the point in the front of the land where the iron rod is, to be able to eliminate the encroachment and do this by a permanent easement for the benefit of 930 Main Street. So we need to go through our procedure in terms of disposing of the property. But that's the MassDOT Office of Real Estate's intention to try and make the accommodation for Habitat.
That's great.
Thank
And
you.
just to clarify, is it an easement? It sounded like you were talking about moving the lot line slightly. Are you changing the property line or granting an easement onto the MassDOT property?
Granting an easement only. Changing the property line would be much more difficult.
Okay, thank you. Kristen, I've got no more questions, and I'd be happy to make a motion unless anybody else.
Sure. I guess we could open it up to public comment. I hadn't seen anything come in, but let me just let participants know they can use the raise hand function, I believe, and we can unmute you. Or you can try typing a question in the Q&A and we can try to answer it there. I'll give people just another minute. Thank you to the applicant for proposing, and we're excited that you're working in Concord. That's got to be something great. 13 years, huh? Since you've been here.
Yeah, 13. Yeah. So, yeah, we're pretty excited about it. So it's a great opportunity for a family. They're walking distance to West Concord, downtown. It's in the school system, really great. Some of the issue is that some of the families that we may outreach to. I'm not sure they know where Concord is. We'll make sure that they know.
Right. There's one public comment typed in from Cynthia Katz. It seems like a great project with wonderful partnerships. I don't have Ms. Katz's address, but thank you for the comment.
And Liz Rust has raised her hand.
Oh, thank you. Can you unmute Ms. Rust?
And Kristen, I think Linda had the question about the local preference.
Oh, sorry, we didn't get to that. Thank you.
That's what I was going to respond to. Can you hear me? Yep.
We can hear you, Ms. Rust. Can you just state your name and address for the record?
Sure. Liz Rust, 201 Commonwealth Avenue, and Director of the Regional Housing Services Office. We've been working really closely with Brenda on this project and the CHDC and through the whole business. There are 2 units there, should they both be approved, and one of them will be offered to a local preference per the DHCD guidelines. And so that would be defined as someone who lives in Concord, someone who works in Concord, or goes to Concord schools or works for the town. And that's very standard in terms of their requirements. Or their
that'd be a restriction just on the first sale, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, I'm seeing no other hands up. And no other comments in the Q&A. So I would entertain a motion.
Kristen, I'd make a motion to recommend to the Zoning Board of Appeals the approval of the application of Habitat for Humanity of Greater Lowell for a special permit under sections 10.3.2 and 11.6 of the zoning bylaw for a 2-unit planned residential development at 930 Main Street, parcel 3818.
Consistent with the town planner's report and conditions of approval.
Consistent with the town planner's report with the conditions of approval as drafted. Thank you.
Is there a second?
I second.
And is there any other board discussion? All right, then we'll go around. We'll take your votes. Mr. Saya?
Yes.
Ms. McEnany?
Yes.
Mr. Bozet?
Yes.
Ms. Orvidal?
Yes.
Ms. Miller?
Yes.
And Mr. Flint?
Yes.
And this is Kristen Ferguson, yes. So we will look forward to seeing the progress. I'm sure you have a lot of, several other things to work out, and hopefully, you'll be increasing your crew before the end of the project because we'll all be working more closely together, we'll see.
Yeah, we'll take any volunteers we can have. So thank you very much. And Elizabeth, especially thank you for helping us get through this process. So we will go to the zoning board on Thursday night, and I truly appreciate your support.
Yes, thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, thanks. So it's just now 7:30, which is the time for our second item. And let's just make sure that, can you see if the applicants are online? Okay, great. So the next item at 7:30 is in accordance with provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 41, Section 81T, and the Town of Concord Subdivision Rules and Regulations. We're continuing this public hearing from our last meeting to review the definitive subdivision plan application for Symes Development and Permitting LLC for a 16-lot subdivision of land at 11B, 146B, and 1442 Main Street and 110 Highland Street. So as a reminder, the applicant did submit additional information along with an opinion from the attorney. So we did receive that. That was received after the close of business on Friday, September 25th. So although that information has been sent to town staff and town council to review, we have not had enough time to compile all of their comments together, and the applicant agreed to continue the public hearing for the majority of this discussion until October 20th with a time extension for the board to file the decision until October 28th. So tonight what we'll be talking about specifically is the traffic impacts, they did submit an updated traffic study, and the applicant's traffic engineer is able to be with us tonight, but not on the next meeting. So we're going to restrict our conversation tonight to those things. So, you know, just to, just to make sure everybody, understands that we did receive the information from the, from the attorney. So we'll get to that a little bit later. So is everybody clear on the planning board, what we're going to be discussing tonight and what we're going to be reserving for October 20th?
Yes.
Okay. So let me turn it over to the applicant, and we are happy to hear about the updated traffic report.
So, good evening, Jeff Ruder here. We're going to just let Jeffrey Dirk present the work that he did. And if you have any other questions outside of that, Rich Harrington is also here. Your show, Jeff.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. And good evening, members of the planning board. For the record, my name is Jeffrey Dirk. I'm a partner with Vanessa and Associates. And we're the traffic engineers on this project. So just by way of, I guess, an introduction, I know you have my letter in your packet. So we prepared a full transportation impact assessment for the project. It was originally proposed back in July of 2018. And the board did have that sent out for a peer review that was conducted by an independent traffic engineer. And that traffic study that we had prepared in July was based on a 36 unit development proposal. And as you know, the development proposal that's currently before you is 18 single family homes. So it's a significant reduction in terms of the number of units are proposed. And that directly translates into a reduction in traffic as well. So the original proposal that we've assessed and that was peer reviewed was producing on the order of between 30 and 40 trips during the weekday peak hours. And the weekday peak hours are when people would be going to work in the morning, so 7 to 9 in the morning, or going to school or dropping off at school. And then the evening peak hour is between 4 and 6 in the evening. So we're producing, but the traffic study was based on about 30 peak hour trips in the morning and 36 actual peak hour trips in the evening. This development proposal, 18 units, is going to produce about half that volume of traffic. So in the morning, it's going to be about 17 peak hour trips. In the morning, in the evening, it's a little bit higher at 20. And so it's a significant reduction in traffic, about half of the volume of what we had originally estimated. And looking back at the July traffic study, as we had done our analysis of the project's impacts along Main Street, we had indicated, and again confirmed by your peer review consultant, is that looking at delays in vehicle queuing at specific intersections, the project wasn't shown to have a significant impact, in that the amount of traffic didn't produce a substantial increase in delays that would change what we typically report as levels of service. So that A through F report card of intersection operations. At the higher development program, we didn't show any changes in levels of service, meaning delays and queues didn't increase to the point where it would be noticeable at any of those intersections. So clearly, in looking at taking about half the volume of traffic from what we had originally estimated, we wouldn't expect any of those conclusions to change. There were a series of recommendations that came up as a part of that July traffic study, and further reinforced by the peer review consultants that dealt with really making sure that we have safe pedestrian accommodations, so that sidewalks, wheelchair ramps, crosswalks, and such along Main Street that lead to the project site would meet Americans with Disabilities Act compliance. So there were some sidewalks that we would be reconstructing, and wheelchair ramps that would be replaced as a part of this project. And then also there were some site distance improvements along Main Street, specifically along the frontage of the project. And you'll see this echoed in some of the correspondence from DPW as well, that there would be some selective tree removal or vegetation clearing that would also need to take place just to ensure that we have maximum sight lines along Main Street. And with those improvements, the sight lines would exceed what's required for an approach speed of 40 miles an hour along Main Street. And we had measured travel speeds pre-COVID that were on the order of about up to 38 miles an hour. So 40 miles an hour is a little bit higher than the prevailing travel speed along the roadway. So again, the prudent design feature would be to design for 40 miles an hour. And we've shown that we can in fact achieve sight lines that would exceed what's required for 40 miles an hour with those recommendations. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. I know that was a brief overview of the transportation assessment, but I'm happy to get into any more detail that you might like.
Thank you. Questions from the board?
A question specifically to regarding the letter on the construction impacts, and I appreciate you putting that together, which I see from the letter. You know, it's not typical. It talks about vehicle trips. I think that the town's response sort of was calling out that these are not passenger cars. These will be, right, I guess, 18-wheel large hauling vehicles that will be leaving. We've got some in excess of 2,000 of those. How did that play into your analysis?
So I think you summarized the letter in terms of what we had said in terms of impacts very well. And so, you know, we don't typically analyze it in the traffic study, and that's true because the volumes are typically less, and we've kind of pointed it out. However, the characteristics of the vehicle, as you pointed out, are much different. So what we're primarily concerned about with respect to trucking traffic relating to construction activities is number one, you know, sight lines related to the trucking activities, because as you might imagine, trucks on level pavement conditions, generally they don't have an issue stopping in terms of their performance relating to a passenger car. So that's not really an issue. However, when they're exiting, and this is what we typically experience, they take longer to accelerate. So as a truck pulls out of the site and then turns onto Main Street, they need longer sight lines for that exiting maneuver in order to pull out and then accelerate, so that if you're on the road, you know, you don't need to really slow down. And that's a performance measure that we try to look at. So if we look at the sight lines that are required for 40 miles an hour, you need 305 feet is the minimum sight line that's required. If you account for larger trucks, those sight lines increase by, you know, it's about 115 feet or thereabouts for a right turning truck. And for a left turning truck, they made more sight lines. So you'd have to increase those values in excess of 200 feet. So I think what we would look at is, in order to not impact the operations along Main Street, because the volume of truck traffic is not the issue, it's really how do they affect the flow of traffic along Main Street. So what we want to do is make sure that if you condition the project, and I know you'll have conditions relating to construction activity, hours of operation, trying to avoid school hours and things like that. The other thing that you'd want to make sure of is that those sightline improvements that we had mentioned in the traffic study, that those are done as a part of the construction activity, that's done first. So if they're bringing equipment in to start doing clearing, grading, things like that on site, that's fine, get those in there. But you want to make sure that the sightline improvements are done as well before you start hauling any gravel or things like that in or out of the site, so that we achieve sight lines that are in excess of 500 feet, which is what we said could be achieved with that vegetation clearing. Because if you limit the hours that construction can take place, that'll limit the time periods when construction traffic will be entering or exiting. And if you do that so that it avoids the commuter peak hours, then you've kind of dealt with having that truck traffic introduced at lower traffic volume periods. And then if you ensure that the sight line improvements are done so that the sight lines exceed 500 feet, then that would mean that trucks exiting the site during those, we'll call it lower traffic volume periods, would at least have the ability to see a car that's coming at them exit and then accelerate even with a full load, so that the traffic on Main Street is not unduly slowing down as a truck tries to exit. So that's what I'm sorry.
Those peak hour periods you're referring to, wanting to avoid, what are those periods?
So I would think kind of the, call it post-COVID period. So what I would try to do is, so 7 to 9 is your morning peak hour. And I think if you avoid those time periods, that will also make sure you really don't want trucking activity when school pickup and drop off is happening, or any children might be waiting for a school bus or walking on the sidewalks. So I think if you know, 7 to 9 is your morning peak hour, I think that will capture your school pickup and drop off as well. And then I would look at that evening time period when you're going to have children leaving school. And so maybe I don't know if that's going to be a 2:30 to 3:30 or 2:30. You definitely want to bracket that school time period as well.
Okay, all right. And in terms of clearing the vegetation, cutting down the trees for the sight lines, are those all are the only trees that are blocking the sight lines that would be sufficient for this? Are those on the property or any of them street trees? Or Elizabeth, do you know? No.
Yeah, I might defer to the site engineer. I mean, they're typically going to be ones that are close up to the driveway, and so we typically, even when we're doing peer reviews, we recommend that you physically, the set of site plans you have physically plots the site triangle on the plan, so you can see that and see exactly where those vegetation may be. That's also helpful if and when there's ever a need for any enforcement actions. The building inspector or the zoning enforcement officer can see the site triangles and know if there's something physically placed in there, because we recommend in the study that area be kept clear. And so it'll be very apparent on the site plan where those sight line areas are.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Can we ask Rich to respond to the impact on trees?
I believe all the trees are on the property. The property along Main Street is about less than 1 foot off the back of the sidewalk. So there's only one tree facing towards West Concord. That's an invasive tree that needs to be removed. That's between the sidewalk and the edge of gutter. And we'll take a look at it in more detail and produce a plan that shows that triangle that the Jeffrey Dirk has spoken about.
Can I ask a follow-up question about the trees? Jeff, hello. Are the sight lines, are there some aspects of the sight lines that are required that are related to the volume of truck traffic?
No, you want the sight lines, whether it's one truck or more. You'd want that anyways, no matter what. Just for safety reasons, you'd want to do that.
Okay. And in terms of your assessment, staying on construction, you looked at the impact to the traffic flow on Main Street. You said, did you assess the air quality impacts from the volume of the activities of the trucks?
That's not, we don't typically, it's not an area that I specialize in doing.
Mm-hmm.
So no, we don't.
Okay.
I mean,
and how about noise? How about noise impacts?
No, we also don't do that. I mean, the trucks have to be compliant with all state and federal regulations. So in terms of, emissions control and noise, they need to be either, they need to at least meet the state and federal requirements. And if the town has more stringent requirements, they would need to meet those as well. But I also think it goes back to, at least from the noise perspective, is your conditions as they relate to construction activities, to make sure that it's not, a nuisance during the time periods when people would be out, enjoying their yard and the fresh air and everything like that. So I think bracketing those time periods we talked about would at least keep it to the typical periods when most people are hopefully eventually will be out working at their offices or wherever it happens to be. But I think bracketing that will at least make sure that any noise related activity or any noises related to construction activities are during the daytime.
Great. And to move over to the operational piece of it, I have two questions. One's sort of more creative than the other. So the more straightforward one is, in your letter, your update letter from September was really helpful. So I think I'm going to ask a question that's probably going to go back to the original assessment. Can you put the number of cars that the project's contributing to the streets in the context of the greater traffic on the road?
Absolutely. So yeah, just bear with me a minute. So this would be, I just want to get the date the traffic counts were done, just to put it in context.
And while you're doing that, Jeff, sorry to pile on.
No.
So at the intersections, can you speak to how the intersections are? I understand that you said there's no, maybe, I don't know if you said measurable or impact level of service. Can you just speak to how those intersections are operating now? Not with COVID, but during normal times.
Yep. So these traffic volumes are from 2018, and they were while schools were in session. So we had measured a daily traffic volume along Main Street right at the project site of about 12,140 vehicles. So that's two-way traffic over 24 hours. And then so for the 18 unit development proposal, it's 216 vehicles over 24 hours. So so the 216 would get added to the 12,140 is the way that would work. So the operating conditions at the study intersections, the majority of the movements were operating at a D or better. So D or better is considered acceptable traffic operations. And again, we didn't cause any changes in levels of service. We did note that at the Main Street, Conant Street intersection, there was one movement that was operating at a level of service of E. So that's considered the design capacity of that specific movement. And that was the cross street approach, or the Conant Street approach during the morning peak hour. That movement was operating at a level of service of E, and it had a vehicle queue of about 5 vehicles. And that was the only movement that we had identified that was operating below a D. And again, D, level of service of D, which is approximately 30 to 35 seconds of wait time at an intersection. That's a D. So if you go above that, then you start to get to an E. If you're more than a minute or more, that's a failing condition. So we were at an E just for that one movement during the morning peak hour, but all the other intersections were generally a D or better, and majority were C or better.
Okay, thank you. And when you look at level of service and whether there's an impact, so I understand that there clearly is an impact if you're moving from one level of service to another, if you're causing a D to go to an E. But there's also an impact, you're potentially contributing to a future level of service change, by putting more cars on the road.
Right.
So you are impacting the intersection, even if you aren't causing a change in the level of service to go from one grade to another.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always caution people, don't just look at the level of service, because even if I show there's no change. So anytime you build a project, it has an impact, period. And no one should tell you anything different. So, but the level of service is just an easy way to kind of explain it. But there are delays will increase for movements at intersections, specifically on the side streets, because if we add more traffic on Main Street, and you're coming out on one of the side streets, there's additional cars going by you. So you need to wait a little bit longer. So the delays increase. And I think what we were showing for the maximum delay increase was on the order of about 5 seconds or less was the delay increase. You will always have an impact because the delays are going to go up. If I add one car, it's going to show delays will go up.
Okay.
So the maximum increase in delay was on the order of about 5 seconds as a result of the addition of the project's traffic. And that was at the 36 unit proposal, so it's a much higher. And that's what we were measuring, but that 5 seconds of additional delay did not translate into additional vehicle queuing. So the two metrics we're really looking at is increases in delay, and those increases in delay could translate into additional vehicles backed up at an intersection. And we didn't show that there was any change in terms of the queuing. So those are really the performance measures you want to look at. Level of service is easy. But it's really, what is the change in delay and what is the increase in queuing?
Great. And so here's my last question. This is the more kind of creative question about thinking about making this project as pedestrian and bicycle and non-vehicle friendly as we can. So there's 2 pieces of it, and I don't really know how to ask this, but I guess one is, and I don't know if this is Jeff or to Rich or Jeff Ruda, Jeff Dirk to Rich. Is the applicant proposing this site is nicely situated relative to the train, the MBTA train, and ideally we would love to design this project, have it designed to encourage people to use the train and to use their vehicles as little as possible. So is there anything that the applicant's proposing to do to encourage that? And then the other piece is there anything that the applicant's doing to encourage to have this neighborhood fit nicely in with the context of the other neighborhoods so that pedestrians from other neighborhoods feel comfortable, and are encouraged to walk through and bike through and walk their dogs and that kind of thing?
That's my question, but
that's The dog
At least
walking is too
I can
much.
say, at least in terms of the sidewalk accommodations that I mentioned, you know, one of the, and I know the community is very focused on pedestrian and bicycle accommodations. And so I know that when the peer review was done, that was really a focus of that as well. So it was a matter of, and that's why I think when they looked at it was how to make sure that we had that barrier-free access for those that wanted to walk to the commuter rail station. So you will see commitments to those sidewalk improvements. So, you know, that's certainly being able to be done to connect the project to the existing sidewalk infrastructure, which is fair, which is, you know, it's fairly robust. It needs to have some improvements done to it, but you know, we do have that. That's actually a benefit to this location, is that we do have that to be able to connect to. And I'm sorry, Rich, I'll let you expand.
No. You're here for a reason. Any foot traffic currently passing by the project to get to the train or bicycles, we're providing a crosswalk at the intersection, so there'll be no impediment to reaching that same goal of getting to the train. Our site has sidewalks, so pedestrians can come down the right-of-way that will be provided, and our residents can also walk up to Main Street to that sidewalk system that does connect over to the train. And if you do have a bicycle, you can, however, the local rules are of getting that bike down to the bike trail that's in the center in that aspect. There'll be no discouragement of using bicycles or walking from this project. And to the extent that the subdivision rules accommodate for that, we have a wider pavement because we're in this residency district, so that can also accommodate uses besides vehicles.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Dirk, one question. In looking at the construction traffic plan, would you recommend in a scenario like this any type of traffic control for the entering and exiting of construction vehicles during the construction period? You're on mute, Mr. Dirk. You're on mute.
Sorry about that. I participate in so many of these, and that's usually what I hear from other people. And yeah, my turn. You know, I typically, the volume we're talking about is not, you know, high as to whether, I mean, I usually defer to the police chief and the police department as to whether they see, I mean, they're the ones who, they know that road better than I ever will in terms of understanding, you know, the volume of traffic at specific times of day. You know, so it's really a question, I guess, for the police chief as to whether, you know, what their level of comfort is in terms of, you know, it's not just controlling the truck traffic, it's also, you know, the pedestrian activity. I know there is a school in close proximity, you know, so it's a question of, you know, how comfortable are they with allowing this to operate uncontrolled based on the volume and their nature of the roads. I always want to defer to the police department.
Okay, thanks. And just a general comment while we're on this subject, really, I guess for the applicant, talking about the hours of trucking and avoiding those school periods, you'll want to make sure you're tapped into the school schedule as it changes for this year and for normal years. I believe Thoreau's getting out now at noon this year. I don't have kids there anymore, but I believe that's they've got a relatively short day there that you need to have to plan around. Those are all my comments, Kristen.
Thanks.
For Mr. Dirk.
I thought I saw another hand from somebody on the planning board. Did everyone get to have their questions answered so far? We have a number of comments that were typed into the Q&A. Thank you very much. And thank you for putting your name and address in. And one of the questions that I think is important to respond to is, you know, what topics are reserved for the meeting later this month. Are basically all of the remaining items, particularly to do with engineering review of the site and the impact on the abutting sites as well. And I will talk a little bit about that before we wrap up. So tonight's discussion, as you saw, and thank you for asking, that was a comment from John Cooley, thank you. Tonight's discussion is really reserved for traffic and this traffic report. So while we have Mr. Dirk on the line here, we want to be sure to ask him any additional questions, and then we'll reserve those questions from the public for the public comment at our next meeting, which is October 20th. So there are a few questions in the Q&A, and I'd like to invite people if they would like to say those questions out loud. I'm going to invite people to raise your hand, and we can unmute you. And if you don't choose to do that, we'll try to read your questions and get an answer for them as well. But I just wanted to make sure people had a chance to speak up if they'd like to. Mm-hmm.
I may have just a point of order, just understanding. Handing it over to public comment now. So is board consideration or discussion of issues closing up for tonight? Because I had another issue that I wanted to discuss that I believe is related to traffic.
Would you like to do it now, or do you want to hear from the public and then kind of come back?
I defer to you. I defer to you.
Let's hear from the. Don't lose your thought.
Yeah.
Let's hear from the public, and then let's kind of wrap it up with your thoughts, and make sure that we're asking the applicant for any additional information before we see them one more time. All right. So you can use the raise hand function, which I don't see any yet. And then another question, Ms. Katz from 20 Conan Street asks, is the sightline calculation in order for trees to be removed? What about the tree bylaw?
So for the tree bylaws, for the construction of the individual house lots, and would not be part of the construction of the roadway and the required improvements for the roadway. So, but I believe Rich Harrington said they will take the existing plan and at least show on that plan the triangle for site distance, and so the board has an understanding of what type of vegetation removal needs to happen.
Mr. Harrington, you said you're going to be able to make that adjustment to the plan, that addition to the plan before we meet again?
Yes, we can. And then the tree bylaw does not apply to a residential subdivision. And we responded to that in our letter.
I did see that, and not to get too far off topic. Well, I'll reserve my other questions for the remaining items that we'd like to see before our next discussion.
Sure.
Similarly, just a point of clarification from Ms. Katz as well. Was the backup you referred to on Conan Street at Conan Street coming onto Main Street, or on Main Street turning onto Conan Street? Mr. Dirk?
It was on Conant Street, waiting to turn onto Main Street, and I can tell you which approach it was as well. So it's a T intersection. So it was the Conant Street southbound approach to Main Street. So it's the vehicles that are waiting to turn onto Main Street from Conant Street.
Okay. We've got a comment from Shelley Amster, a couple of comments on 44 Prairie. And just, I think she was clarifying the current COVID school schedules going to remain different during COVID. Currently, the neighborhood impacted by Thoreau School Elementary is very different, indefinitely. Currently, teachers, parents, and buses start around 7 to 9:30 and 11:30 to 1, and again 3 to 3:30 for Thoreau, as parents are 80% driving, drop off, or biking or walking kids to Thoreau. So this is much busier than before COVID, she says. How is the candidate going to address this now as they're moving trucks and workers in and out?
Similar to previous designs, the applicant and the contractor will meet with the police department to review the current situations at time of construction. And I do agree that the traffic schedule is fluid with the school and will continue to do so. So there'll be more meetings than typical because of that adjustment.
Scott Richardson from 260 Elsinore Street asks, did the traffic study identify the number of trucks passing the site today that are similar to the size and type of trucks that will be used for earth removal?
So again, the traffic study doesn't quantify that, but what I can tell you is that, so we spoke about the 12,000 some odd vehicles going by the site. Is we looked at the composition of the traffic stream. Obviously, the majority of that traffic is passenger cars and light duty pickup trucks and such. The large size trucks that would be representative of the type of vehicles that would be hauling gravel or material in and out of the site, it comprises about less than 1% of that traffic based on the measurements that we had performed out there. So it's a relatively small amount of traffic. The most of the trucks that you see out there are they'd be the FedEx, UPS, Amazon, those type of vehicles, or landscaping trucks. They're more light duty trucks, and those type of vehicles aren't going to impact the traffic flow. It's really the larger, those heavy duty trucks, which is again less than 1% of the traffic that's out there today.
Nancy Kerr from 25 Upland Road asks, does this traffic plan cover the proposed excavation, or is it concerning house construction only?
So the traffic numbers that we looked at are really it was the largest amount of truck activity that's expected at the project site. So, we were predicting about, 10 truck trips during the peak traffic volume period. So I think that's pretty reasonable in terms of the amount of activity, even with the home building activity. And again, there may be days when it's a little bit more than that, but I think that's pretty reasonable in terms of the maximum number. We're only talking about 18 homes being built there, so it's not it's not going to be unlike like an apartment building where you'd have a lot of trades coming in there all at once, especially if you're doing drywall or things like that. That's not the type of construction that's taking place here.
Christine, you've got a hand up.
Thank you. That's Krista Collins. Can we promote her so that we can hear her comment, please? Ms. Collins, can you state your name and address, please? She might be unmuting herself.
There we go. Sorry, this is Jeff Collins, signed in under my wife Krista's name, 55 Highland Street.
Thank you.
Question is, if I understand the traffic engineer's comments, a left turning truck would want about 500 feet of sight line, but a quick Google Earth analysis shows that's just not possible as Main Street kind of curves as you're looking west to the right of a truck or a vehicle exiting the site. How does that go into the analysis and sort of the functionality of that use?
So the one thing that you don't see in a straight line. So if you're drawing a straight line analogy on it, that's not how we all look. And so we look at it's a cone of vision, and that's typically the way it's described. So actually, the further away from the point where the vehicle would be exiting the site, your sight line actually you can see wider because the cone, as you get away from your eyes at that point, is larger. So the sight lines that we measured actually from the driveway, if you're looking in in both directions with the vegetation management that we're talking about, will exceed 500 feet. Even though the roadway may be curving in a direction, you still will be able to perceive a vehicle that's approaching you because your cone of vision is larger the further away from the driveway you get.
Thanks. And there was a follow-up question. I apologize for something that you had just mentioned. This question's from Scott Richardson at Elsinore Street. He asked to clarify, please, is heavy duty is less than 1%, or all trucks are less than 1%, he asks.
So it's basically the classification would be more than 3 axles. So that's the classification. Those are considered the heavy duty trucks. So your dump trucks, triaxles, or the 10 wheels or larger. That's really, that composition would be heavy duty trucks. As you get less than 3 axles, that's where it's the landscape, the UPS, the FedEx, the things like that. So as I'm speaking of the 1%, it's vehicles that have 3 or more axles.
Kristen, it looks like we don't have any open questions. If I can direct a couple questions to the letter from Attorney Latham.
Yes, related to this particular topic, please.
Related to traffic. Well, one question that I think we need answered before our next meeting, and so I'd like to give the applicant the opportunity. I have another one that is, I think, related to traffic, but it's addressed in the letter. Is that okay? So the first question, thank you for the letter. It really helped clarify my thinking. On the point on the affordable land set aside, I take it that if I can distill that, it's that our subdivision rules and regulations that require a set aside for affordable housing, that is the opinion of the applicant is beyond the permissible scope of the subdivision control law, and thus it's not within our authority to require that set aside. My question is, will the applicant be requesting a waiver, or are you otherwise just not addressing that? So,
Burton, so in my memo, I did let the board know that Attorney Latham's opinion letter has been sent to town council, and we will be getting town council's input on that. So that's why tonight's discussion was going to be limited to traffic.
Okay. All right, fair enough. But I didn't want to hijack at the October 20. I mean, we're going to be up against the deadline, so I just wanted to let them know that that was going to be a question I would have. And I guess the other point, it's in the letter, but it does really go to traffic, because I think that my comments from our last meeting may have been misconstrued, and this goes to the question of unsuitable land. And it's not really about the earth removal per se. I do appreciate that there is a separate special permit for earth removal that must be removed. And I found case law that shows that zoning boards have denied special permits for earth removal for projects where a large amount of earth needed to be removed after a subdivision was approved. So I appreciate that that is a separate issue. What I was really going to, though, on unsuitable land, I think that the general purpose of the subdivision control law, if I can, it's essentially, let me just see if I can run through that here. One second. It says, the subdivision control law has been enacted for the purpose of protecting the safety, convenience, and welfare of the inhabitants of the cities and towns in which it is, or may hereafter be put into effect, as it has been in Concord, regulating the laying out and construction of ways and subdivisions. Okay, so I just want to, the purpose that we can consider is protecting the safety, convenience, and welfare of inhabitants in the laying out and construction of ways. So it's not just the design, but it's the implementation of the design. Then in the letter, it said that from Attorney Latham was really talking about, it's not about construction activities. That's not what the subdivision control law goes to. I would argue otherwise, but it's about essentially whether the design and the as-built subdivision is suitable. And I'm getting to traffic, Elizabeth, don't worry. Our section 622 is quoted in Attorney Latham's letter. It actually, I believe, goes to not just the final design, but it also goes to, in determining whether land is unsuitable, it goes to eliminating any short-term or long-term impacts. And I don't think it would talk about short-term as opposed to long-term if it wasn't talking about the construction period. So reading 622, it says, land that the planning board finds to be unsuitable for development due to flooding, improper drainage or adverse drainage, adverse topography, poor soils, bedrock, location of utility easements, or other features, which the board has reason to believe would be harmful to the safety, health, and general welfare of the present or future inhabitants of the subdivision and or its surrounding area. And it shall not be subdivided or developed unless adequate measures are formulated to eliminate any short-term impacts. So that's why I said I'd really like to see a well thought out traffic plan. And it was very helpful to get some of that information from Mr. Dirk around hours of operation. But just to emphasize some points in 622, it's land which we find unsuitable for development due to adverse topography, because it would be harmful to the safety, health, and general welfare of present or future inhabitants of the surrounding area. So I think that falls clearly within the scope of the subdivision control law. And I think it means that we do need to take into account construction activities, including the traffic, the idling of trucks. I think if we had we're going to have well over 2,000 heavy duty truck trips here. If they each idled for no more than 10 minutes, as was said, I think that works out to being something like 350 hours of idling. I'm sure the residents of Highland Street would not be excited to have a multi-axle heavy-duty trucks idling for 350 hours. That's a very long period of days. So what to work through this unsuitable land question, I mean, I believe it really does, this provision of the bylaw really does go to the impact of during the construction period. And I think it's a reasonable rule as allowed under the subdivision control law. I would really like to see more from the applicant information on how they will avoid disrupting this neighborhood in the short term. Because I think that needs to be taken into account as stated in 622. I'd also ask if the point was made that it's not unsuitable land. It would really help me maybe understand that argument if there was a counterexample of what is unsuitable land. If this is not, it seems to be the argument is being made that because the land can be made suitable through significant modification of the topography, that it is in fact not unsuitable, which would suggest that any application filed is per se suitable, because otherwise somebody wouldn't be proposing to develop on it. And I don't think that's, first of all, I think 622 is within the scope of the subdivision control law. And this is a question that's being put to us as a board. If there's an example of land that is unsuitable for reasons other than flooding, improper drainage, or poor soils, bedrock, or location of utility easements, in other words, something other than those things that falls within adverse topography, I would love to hear what that is. I've been racking my brain, and I've been having a hard time short of an active volcano.
So I thought we're not getting into this today. Yeah. And I just saw that their attorney turned himself on, and
yeah, thank you.
Sorry, Kristen.
Did you want to? I wanted to add directly to what Burton is saying, but Ms. McEnany, do you want to comment about this? I want to keep.
Yeah,
make sure
my
we're on
comment
focus
is that this is outside the scope of what Mr. Dirk is here to discuss, and with the scope of the traffic impact study, and it goes directly to the letter from the attorney that we are having our town council look at.
And so why that's relevant though, and Burton, thanks for bringing this up. So I'm just going to jump in here to add to what you said, because what we want to make sure is we want to make sure that the applicant is fully prepared and has submitted everything that we've requested before the next meeting, so that we can have those deliberations at that next meeting. Again, where we have an extension to file until October 28th, and we have that one meeting before then. So, Burton, just a couple of quick points. I think we're wrapping up our discussion, our questions for Mr. Dirk while he's on the phone, I believe. Before I proceed, let me just make sure that's the case. Are there any other board members that have any questions for Mr. Dirk about the traffic impact? And Mr. Dirk, I think, is unable to be with us on the 20th.
Correct.
Okay. The last question from public comment about traffic, and then I'm going to move on, is from Jeff Collins, 55 Highland. Oh, no, this is Krista, excuse me, Krista Collins, 55 Highland, asking for clarification about whether the traffic projected to be generated by the new A&R lots on the same property were considered in the traffic count.
No. We took, as you know, the subdivision is 16 lots, and because 2 of the lots have frontage on both Main and the new subdivision road, we added that. So that's why Jeff's counts were 18 rather than 16.
Okay, thank you. So the focus of tonight's call was the traffic impact, and Mr. Dirk, thank you for thoroughly answering the questions that we had, and there are a lot, and I think we're still going to be discussing them in the grand scope of things. Burton and the rest of the planning board, we did have a conversation with town council today. I was able to listen in while town council was speaking with Elizabeth and Ms. Rasmussen. And their opinion is that the exclusionary bylaw is valid and duly enacted. So that's kind of to the first part of your question, Burton. So, you know, with that, the applicant needs to know that that's our opinion of that. And to the second point, and in terms of having the applicant be prepared and submit everything so that we can have a full review and discussion, particularly of the suitability of the site. Although, you know, and within the subdivision rules and regulations, we really do want to address, we want the applicant to show how they can quantify, how they can, are showing measurable impact, or how this project is impacting the design or how the design of the subdivision is impacting the suitability of the site. So actual construction on the site is impacting the site, including issues of runoff to the isolated wetland and also to the abutters property, because the wetland continues to the abutters property. Also, what are the considerations and what is the impact? How can they show what the impact is going to be for the erosion and subsistence, I'm not going to say right, of properties to the west, because that steep slope that they're proposing goes right up to the abutters property. So I'm kind of listing some of these things that I want to make sure the applicant takes note of and can address with plenty of time for the board to review before we meet again. Additionally, with what is the impact of the tree removal and which is going to cause the inability of soil to retain water for the proposed houses, particularly at the bottom of the hill. So we're really trying to understand, you know, what have you done to really quantify those impacts of dramatically changing the site, and how they're going to directly affect those direct abutters and even the houses on the site itself. And Elizabeth, I'll just add, in case I have misspoken or if I've left anything out, what we really want to do is give the applicant a chance to address the things that the town engineer asked for on those plans so that that can be properly evaluated, and the additional impact that we're specifically calling out several of these things so that we have all of that information. So if you could just state anything else that maybe could be stated more clearly.
Oh, you summarized it perfectly.
So Burton, I'm hoping that is capturing your point. We've got the one more meeting we want to discuss. We want everything, we want the applicant to have time so that the town engineer and Elizabeth can help process that information, so we have it all, so that we have all the evidence we need in order to, you know, make our deliberation and make our decision. Can you think of anything else that we should ask the applicant to submit? And then Elizabeth, I'll ask you to kind of give us the deadline again, so that you have time, and the town engineer especially has time to review this.
I'm sorry. Before, can I just ask a procedural question? It kind of precedes what Burton. So I understood. I think I understood incorrectly that we would receive a response from town council, and then we would have a chance to kind of answer the question that you just asked, Kristen. So is your synthesis the response?
Oh no.
Okay. Are we gonna have like an email or a letter or something, or?
We're definitely going to have town council's opinion, and we do on the inclusionary bylaw so far. But regarding the applicant's opinion of suitability of site, you know, we need to operate within, you know, our subdivision rules and regulations, and we need to operate within the bylaws of our town. And so we as the planning board need evidence to make that determination about suitability. And I want to make sure the candidate has time to give us evidence that we can use to make that deliberation.
Got
if
it.
that makes sense.
Got it. Sorry to jump in there, Burton.
No, that's right.
Well, yeah, I mean, what I would like to elicit is what are those adequate measures? I think that my inquiry on the last meeting and this meeting are not about earth removal per se. That was properly for the Zoning Board of Appeals in that permit application. Rather, it is the fact that what it would appear to me as a situation where there is adverse topography, as illustrated by the proposed removal of 60,000 yards of earth, that has the potential to be harmful to the safety, health, and general welfare of present residents of the surrounding area. And I would like to see adequate measures formulated, because otherwise I don't think we can vote to allow subdivision of the land per our bylaw. So as just reading right off the bylaw, and I wanted to emphasize that I would be coming back to this point because I disagree with the assertion that was made that neither our bylaw or the subdivision control law under which it is created allows for consideration of the construction period. And I disagree with that. And that would be a point I'll be coming back to at our next meeting. I think those adequate measures do go to traffic trucking. So that's what I would want to see measures on. Thank you.
So I'd like to, yes, Rich.
Thank you. So 6.2.2 says it land which the planning board finds to be unsuitable, and then we would provide adequate measures to respond to that. So you mentioned adverse topography as your concern for it to possibly be unsuitable. Are there any other aspects that we need to respond to? I know she had a list, but are there any other than that aspect? For
me, no. I think the other issues of flooding, improper drainage, adverse poor soils, bedrock. I don't know, Kristen, if any of those were on your list. Mine is focused on the topography question.
It's most definitely mine as well, but I think about the impacts of just even the trucks driving on that site, then changing the soil conditions and things like that. I want to know kind of what study has been done about those impacts. And so I thinking with the flooding of the potential because of the tree removal and the soil's inability to now capture that water and those lower lying houses. So I am kind of looking at the larger picture of the impacts of changing the site in such a drastic way and how that's going to affect the property owners and the abutters. So Rich, do you think, and Elizabeth, do you think that you have a list of things that you need to bring to this board so we can evaluate, how the impact of this project at our next meeting? Do you think you have a handle on what we're asking for?
So
yes, and I can, both Marcia and I can schedule a call with Jeff and Rich to go over that in more detail if needed.
You should do that. I have a question. If you're looking to the topography and the unsuitability, what changes here from the PRD recommendation that you gave?
Sure.
The only difference is we did the same cuts and we pushed the earth in the back, and now we're removing more earth. That's the only difference. Topography doesn't change. We still took the top of the hill off and just pushed all the dirt back.
Yeah, that's not a question that I'm gonna suggest the board not answer.
Well, we have to evaluate it based on the definitive subdivision plan and the rules and regs that apply to that. But Burton, if you wanted to add, I don't know that's necessary, but if you'd like to.
It is on record.
If I could expand a little further. We replied.
Rich, are you asking about what documents you need before or additions to the plan to submit before our next meeting?
Yes, it's just that we submitted an 11-page letter responding to all the comments. And Elizabeth, do you believe that the staff can respond to some of those or reduce that, give a quick review by the end of the week and say, a bunch of that's been addressed? Because we did do a drainage study and we responded to the concerns about flooding and drainage and changes and things like that have been brought up tonight.
So staff is responding to the information that was already submitted. They're reviewing it now and going to, I hope to get responses in the next couple of days. Correct.
That'll be fantastic. So if we could have that by the end of the week, then we'll proceed with all the other updates to prove that we do have adequate measures. So everything has been designed per typical standard engineering standards that you see in every subdivision, and we'll prove that in additional detail.
And did I see in the town engineer report that there were still several things outstanding that were waiting for, he was waiting for changes to the plan?
As far as what engineering still needs, they're reviewing what was submitted and they will prepare their response. And that's what I'm waiting for in the next couple of days.
Okay. And then what's the, the applicant will hear back from you, and then what's the timeline that they need to respond to you so that we can have every time to review, the town departments have time to review, and you do, and we do before the October 28th meeting?
It's going to be just another tight turnaround. So I'm hopeful staff is going to get comments back in the next day or two, and then hopefully things can be turned around and submitted by the middle of next week, and then staff will have to again turn things around quickly.
Okay, so we will look forward to really having, I'm sorry, Nathan, go ahead.
I just wanted to ask sort of a technical question on 6.2.2. What is sort of the understood definition of general welfare that's listed there? I mean, health and safety, sort of a little more clear cut, but general welfare when applied to present or future inhabitants seems like a pretty wide open for interpretation.
And then I can only tell you that it's not defined in the subdivision control law, but it is used in the subdivision control law, or it's actually even more general. It just refers to welfare. I do not believe that term is defined in the law.
Thank you.
So there's two pieces that we need to do, that the board needs to do. The board needs to, we need a motion to continue the public hearing to October 20th. And Elizabeth, do we have a time? Is it 7 o'clock or? She's thinking.
Do you have to vote to also extend the decision timeline?
That's the second one. I want to just get the time first. Thanks.
I don't think there's anything else. So for your October 20th meeting, I believe Chris from MAPC is going to come back with an update on a couple points of the Thoreau Depot redevelopment project. So he'll be on at 7. So if you want to continue this to 7:30 or 7:45.
Okay. So the two things we need are a motion to continue the public hearing to October 20th at 7:30. And then the second motion we'll need is to grant the time extension for the planning board to file its decision with the town clerk to October 28th. So I just wanted you to know that both of those things were going to happen. So I will entertain a motion for one of those to start.
And Kristen, the last thing is just acceptance of Linda Miller's certification that she reviewed the previous public hearing material.
Thanks. So to clarify, this is Linda's first meeting with us as a board member, but she has observed other meetings and she's had the opportunity to watch videos of the proceedings so that she's able to be fully up to speed with this project. And so as we have I don't know if it's a protocol that we have in order to, I'm not gonna say this right, kind of, she can certify what she has done so that she can be a voting member, if I'm stating that mostly correctly.
And Nancy just remembered, Alan, did you do the same?
So So town staff is doing that. And then Marcia has her hand up. So maybe before we do the motion.
Alan, I think Alan also reviewed the first public hearing. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
The rule that you're discussing is the Mullen Rule, which was adopted by town meeting and allows people who have not participated in perhaps one hearing to review that and then submit certification that they have reviewed it. So just to clarify the rule.
Thank you. Okay. So now I will entertain a motion to continue the public hearing.
I would make a motion that we that we continue the public hearing to the meeting of October 20th at 7 p.m.
I think we want to do it at 7:30.
7:30, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Is there a second?
A second.
Mr. Bosdet?
Abstain.
This is just for continuing, okay? Mr. Saya?
Yes.
Ms. Miller?
Yes.
Ms. McEnany? Ms. McEnany says yes. Mr. Flint?
Yes.
Ms. Orbital? And Ms. Ferguson, yes. So the second motion would be to grant a time extension for the planning board to file its decision with the town clerk to October 28th.
I'll make a motion that we vote to extend the deadline to file a decision with the town clerk to October 28th in accordance with the applicant's extension request.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Ms. Miller?
Yes.
Ms. McEnany? Mr. Flint?
Yes.
Ms. Orbital? Mr. Saya?
Yes.
And Mr. Bosdet?
Abstain.
Okay. So thank you to the applicant. We will see you again on the 20th. And thanks for Elizabeth and Marcia for working together so that we make sure we have all the evidence we need to review for our next meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kristen, before you go on, if I can ask Chris Carmody to unmake Nancy a co-host and demote her as a panelist and then re-promote her. She's having video issues, so she cannot see what's happening. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So the last couple of items, we have an approval not required plan for 165X, 1651, 1657 Main Street, parcels 2685, 2686, and 2687. Are you going to pull that up on your computer, Elizabeth?
Yes.
Thank you. And this is the PRD there, correct?
Correct. Can everybody see that well enough?
Yes.
So if everybody remembers the Mill Run Commons PRD, this is Main Street in West Concord. This is the current Riverwalk development. And currently the Mill Run development there's one lot back here, one lot for the house up front and another lot for the converted barn. What this A&R plan does is just combines the three lots into a single lot.
Elizabeth, I will abstain from this just because I'm a direct abutter. It seems silly to do it on an A&R, but would you agree that makes sense?
It's fine.
All right, thanks.
Are there any questions or discussion about the A&R, what Elizabeth's showing? Okay, then I would entertain a motion. So everybody have their memo in front of them. If not, I'll do it. I can do it. There it is. The planning board should move to endorse the plan. I move that the planning board endorse the plan for now Concord, Maine LLC dated September 23rd, 2020 as approval not required because the plan is not a subdivision, because the combined lot has at least 80 feet of frontage on an adequate public way, and authorize the chair, clerk, or town planner to endorse the plan. Is there a second?
Second.
Is that Nathan?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Miller?
Yes.
Ms. Orvidal?
Yes.
Mr. Saya?
Yes.
Ms. McEnany?
Yes.
Ms. Ferguson, yes. And Mr. Flint is
Abstaining. Yep.
Okay. And then do we have one more A&R? Okay.
Yes. So give me 2 seconds and I will give me one more second. So I'm going to promote the Henry Dane, who is the attorney for the property owners, in case he has anything he wants to add. And then I think one of the property owners is also, and then I will go ahead and share my screen. And this is a side view. Sorry, I'm not able to rotate this. This is Nishotic Road, is up at the top. Down at the bottom, this is Squaw Sachem Trail. And what if the board needs to, I can bring it. I can bring up the town's web GIS and show you exactly where that is if that's helpful. It'll just take me a minute. Would that be helpful?
Yes. Yes, it would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so this is Main Street down here. Then it goes off to Elm Street over here. This is Nishotic Road coming off of Main Street, Nishotic Road wrapping all the way around. This is the lot under discussion tonight. Off of Nishotic Road is Squaw Sachem Trail. Squaw Sachem Trail is, it's an old right-of-way from this initial subdivision. It is a private way, it is not public. It has been improved all the way down to 80 Squaw Sachem Trail. So what the, oh, sorry, see if I can. Oh. So what the applicant is proposing to do is they have provided an A&R plan as well as a street improvement plan. And the street improvement plan shows improvement of Squaw Sachem Trail, from the current end at 80 Squaw Sachem, and how the road would be improved to an adequate pavement, grade, drainage for 150 feet, which is the required frontage in the Residence A zone district. So that they can provide the sufficient frontage and area to create this new A&R lot divided off from this lot. There is a condition, a note on the plan. It is right here, stating that no building permit for lot B2 shall be issued prior to the improvement of the unpaved portion of the way, to the standards set forth in section 3.3.1 of the subdivision rules and regs, and is inspected and approved by the Concord Public Works. So what the applicant is asking for the board to endorse this A&R, conditionally endorse this A&R plan, that this lot will have sufficient frontage on an adequate public way, conditioned upon that street improvement plan and those improvements being constructed prior to a building permit being issued.
Elizabeth, so is this is currently one lot?
This is currently one lot from Nishotic Road all the way down to the river.
So this is fascinating. I'm going to have some questions. So it's one lot, but it has an existing established public way that runs through the middle of it?
Private way. It is not public. Okay,
so even though the road needs to be built, this is not a subdivision?
No, they've provided a street improvement plan to bring this portion of this private way up to adequate standards.
Okay, but because the private way has already been established, as it would appear, right?
It's already been established and improved up to 80 Squaw Sachem.
Okay, so the reason this is not a subdivision of land is because there is already established and recorded a private way that goes through there that would provide the necessary frontage for lot B2.
Correct. It's been improved up to 80 Squaw Sachem.
So is it the case that that Squaw Sachem is either predates the subdivision control law or it was already previously approved for creating a private way?
No, and Marcia can correct me, but I'm fairly certain it predates subdivision control law. It was laid out before 1929.
Okay, all right. I've just asked because I've spent some time with the subdivision control law recently, and this is very interesting. Okay.
And so there, what you're showing is currently that just dirt path through there, and there's room. So did a town department review that there is room to make this improvement?
Yeah, Squaw Sachem, the right of way is 40 feet.
Okay. I mean, it's 40 feet when they clear that all, right?
The road improvement plan does not clear 40 feet. No. Okay. I believe the current width of Squaw Sachem at this area is roughly 14 feet.
Okay.
So it would extend that existing pavement for 150 feet in front of lot B2.
Okay. And Linda, my apologies. Approval not required, and I know you are getting yourself up to speed and everything. When these come before the board, there's just a couple of factors that we are able to take into account after we've asked any questions to make sure we understand. And I believe they are that it, if it's not a subdivision, that it has the proper frontage on the way, and it has the an adequate square footage. And if it has those two things, the approval is not required, and I think we approve it.
So what I can explain a little further, and for Linda's benefit, she has not gotten her packet of stuff that you all get when you become a planning board member, which includes your zoning bylaw, your subdivision regs. We have other handouts regarding, like subdivision control law, approval not required plans. But under the subdivision control law, the state specifically states that the division of a tract of land into 2 or more lots, including re-subdivision, provided that such division shall not be deemed to constitute a subdivision under subdivision control law if at the time it is made, every lot within the tract has frontage on a public way, a way which the town clerk certifies as maintained and used as a public way, a way shown on a plan, therefore approved and endorsed in accordance with subdivision control law, or a way in existence as of February 28th, 1938, meeting the standards of the board as set forth in section 3.3. So this was laid out prior to 1938. And then if you go to section 3.3, which is in the board's rules and regs under an approval not required, it gives the standards in determining what is an existing private way that is adequate. It's at least 40 feet wide. Does the existing horizontal and vertical alignment of the travelway provide safe visibility? This is a fairly straight corridor. Is the traveled way constructed at least 18 feet wide with at least 8 inches of depth gravel, and was adequate provisions for drainage? That's what this plan shows. It shows, the cross section, the depth of gravel, the width of the pavement. And if the road could ever service more than 5 dwellings, is it bituminous surface or have provisions made for surfacing without cost to the town? And this is showing that it would be a paved roadway. Have provisions been made for public utilities without cost to the town? There is public utilities running through this section. And I believe there's an actual town sewer main that runs through here. And yes, so 3.3.1.
I have some questions. And maybe they're irrelevant or maybe they're not, but Squaw Satcham up until this point is becoming parallel to the Reformatory Trail off of the Assabet River. And when it gets to this point, it's getting quite a bit more closer to the river. So in terms of that distance to the river, there are a couple questions. Would there be any adverse effects of this road being placed closer to the Assabet? And then the question is, in terms of the current use of the Reformatory Trail, you can walk all the way from Squaw Satcham to the Concord Land Conservation Trust areas on the other side. And would this use of the land interfere with the river confluence trails that are over there? Or are those things irrelevant?
Well, they're not irrelevant, but they're not relevant to the discussion of an approval not required plan. So an approval not required plan is only looking at whether there's adequate frontage for the creation for that new lot.
Can we assume, Elizabeth, looking at that plot, or at this, the web map you've got up, that the reformatory rail bed has been extinguished by by several lots in a row, in terms of a right of way, at what is now going to be this lot B2? Is that what I'm seeing here? I see that.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. So Linda, I think, again, separate from the discussion of whether an approval is required or not, I would presume if that's turned into a buildable lot that trails through there would be impacted. But as you can see from this web map, that it was at some prior point in time, presumably 1920s, that the rail bed right of way was extinguished here for 1, 2, 3, 4 lots. You can see it ending on the, you can see it starting back up in the upper left-hand corner here. Yeah. This is one of those.
And we can ask, I think Marcia's actually done some research on this if she wants to jump on.
Oh, no, I was just going to say Burton is correct that the, because of the way railroads obtained their right-of-way, sometimes they were easements, sometimes they were outright ownership. This is a situation where, because of how the railroad achieved its right-of-way, it reverted back to the original parcels. Yeah. The other piece that I'd like to add, if I may, is that it may have been the town assessor that required the two pieces because they owned on each side of the Squaw Sachem right-of-way. The town assessor may have required that the parcels be joined. And so separating them is this process of a street improvement plan.
Thanks. So
and just to confirm, Elizabeth, that, I mean, on this map, Squaw Sachem does not continue through those lots, but that is a recorded private way, right? Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, I mean, it's used actively now. I mean,
it's
people walk through those trails.
And people would be trespassing, technically.
Yeah. I mean, it's a pretty well-established trail, and I mean, I've walked along it, but I did not realize that the railroad right-of-way doesn't exist there. It's interesting.
So when we make a motion for this, are we saying as with the condition of the road being there? Because we can't say it has adequate frontage on the road yet, right? How do we state this?
No, so the motion would be to endorse the endorse the plan as approval not required with the stated note condition that no building permit shall be issued until the roadway is constructed to the standards of, what's on, yeah. Constructed to the standards, what is it, 3.3.1 of the subdivision rules and regs, and inspected and improved by Concord Public Works.
Nathan?
I have a question. Maybe they can't answer it. I noticed that the main property is currently for sale. Is this planned work going to be done as part of the sale, before the sale, or just being offered up to a potential buyer as a way to sell off some of the land? I'm trying to understand how that kind of fits in the timing of this. But again, that may not be for us to know, I guess.
Well, it's, as Ms. Linda Miller's question, it might be a question, but it's not one for, you know, relevant to the discussion for an A&R.
Yep, fair enough.
Any other questions? This is probably the first time we've seen something like this, or that I have, so it's an interesting case.
I believe after talking with Marcia, I think this has happened once or twice before.
Yes, I would agree. I have seen it happen.
And was the road constructed or continued?
In the case that I'm aware of, no, it was done for valuation purposes and then sold to the land trust.
Oh, interesting. All right. Would anyone like to make a motion?
I have just one additional question.
Sure.
Prior to the construction of a road, would natural resources be required to review this given the proximity to the Assabet?
If those improvements are within 200 feet of the river, yes, they would need to file a notice of intent.
Okay, so because it looks to me as if it is within 200 feet.
Then they would be required to file a notice of intent.
Okay.
Okay. Kristen, I'm just looking for verbiage here that we need to,
You're gonna move to endorse the A&R with the stated noted condition.
Yeah, I'm just looking for the full.
I don't think we have this one written down, or not that I noted.
No, this was filed yesterday.
Okay, all right. Then if you're okay with me winging it, I move that the planning board endorse as approval not required the plan. It's I guess number 20-13 for 357 Nishotic Road, parcel 1752-2. Is that sufficient?
Yes.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Did we get with the stated noted conditions?
Oh, yeah, with endorsed with the plan containing the conditions pertaining to improvement of the road prior to the issuance of any building permit.
Still second it.
Thank you.
Discussion? All right, Mr. Saya?
Yes.
Ms. Miller?
I'm going to abstain.
Okay. Ms. Orvidal?
Yes.
Ms. McEnany?
Yes.
Mr. Flint?
Yes.
Mr. Bosdet?
Yes.
And this is Kristen Ferguson, yes. All right, thank you, Mr. Dane, for being on in case we had questions. I hope you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate your support.
And now we've got a set of minutes from September 22nd. That was fast, by the way. Is that Nancy?
Yes, that is all Nancy.
Thank you, Nancy. That was really fast. Did anyone have any comments or grammatical improvements to the minutes of September 22nd?
Looked good to me. Thorough and accurate.
Yeah, I did not notice. I did not notice anything.
With no comments, I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes of September 22nd as drafted.
Is there a second?
Second.
I'll let Haley have that second. Mr. Saya?
Yes.
Mr. Bosdet?
Yes.
Ms. McEnany?
Yes.
Mr. Flint?
Yes.
Ms. Orvidal?
Yes.
Ms. Miller?
Yes.
And this is Kristen Ferguson, yes. So then that brings us to one of our last things. We would open it up for public comment. So if there's any hangers-on that you would like to comment, please raise your hand or type something in the Q&A, and then we'd ask you to give your name and address before you speak. And while we're doing that, I'll ask if there are any town staff updates or liaison reports that people would like to share.
I do not have any updates. I don't know if Marcia has any.
No updates here.
I don't see any public comment yet. One thing that I forgot to pass along at our last meeting was just based on information of the chair breakfast, not necessarily relevant, but interesting, and this group might get to other people. Did you know that there are, regarding economic vitality, which is relevant to us, but that there are public and private grants available to Concord businesses? $210,000 are available for small businesses. There's a Concord Together business grant, $215,000 with a cap of $2,500 each. It's open to Concord businesses. So that's from the Economic Vitality Committee, and I just thought I would pass that information along so we knew kind of what other committees are working on to, I just thought that was pretty great in this tough time. So hopefully you guys have heard that, and if not, maybe businesses that you patronize have heard that. So with that, if there is no other comment from anyone, we can adjourn at 9:02, and let's be fresh when we meet again, October 20th.
Well then, thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody.